Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Katie Sterling Morrow. I'm the marketing coordinator with SDK. We're really excited to be hosting our first event of the year here and happy that you all decided to join us. Today, we'll have Patrick Chorley host our Purview demonstration. He's a principal architect with SDK out of Edmonton. We are recording today, so if you do miss anything, we'll be sending that recording out later on, along with our slide decks. So if you also have any questions throughout the presentation, I'll be monitoring the chat, and we'll try to answer all of your questions. But if we do miss anything, please don't hesitate to send us an email afterwards. The slide decks will also include links to our Azure Marketplace, where you can find more information on our Purview offerings. So Patrick, if you're all ready to go, I think we could probably get started here.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. So today we're going to talk about Microsoft Purview, specifically demystifying data governance with Azure Purview. We're going to look at why people are getting excited about Purview, the driving factors, and kind of what SDK has to offer around those. So as Katie mentioned a little bit, the agenda today is we're going to do a quick introduction to SDK and our focus, some of our success stories, specifically the ones around Purview, an overview of Purview, an overview of Purview Manager, which is like a little something we built out with Purview that a lot of our clients have enjoyed, a demo of Purview, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, make sure to, how are we doing, Katie? Are we you raise your hand? Or it's just going to be in the chat?
Yeah, I think we can just do in the chat, and then
Perfect.
I can pass them along to you as well.
Cool. Yeah. So we're looking to do about a 30-minute presentation today. I think it's going to be about 15 minutes of slides, 15 minutes of, or 10, 15 minutes of demo, and then about 5 minutes for Q&A. So that is the agenda. So first things first, we are SDK Tek. We are a data and analytics consulting firm. We're a boutique consulting firm, which means we're smaller than the big guys. We offer maybe a little bit more personal experience, and we focus specifically on data. So the lines of business we have is data engineering, which is the ingestion and transformation of data science, which is the predictive element of it, creating those features, and data reporting. So that's Power BI and any sort of visualization. Around that, we have platform DevOps, so it's the ability to quickly be able to deploy to different environments and implement changes as we need to, which also includes ML ops. Where does Purview fit into this? Well, Purview kind of sits all around this, right? It's so important to know the lineage of your data engineering, your ML models, your Power BI models. So it kind of exists all around it, and it's becoming very important. So I'm glad you all were able to join us today to talk a little bit about it. We're all over Canada. We have a physical office in Edmonton, where I'm calling from today. In Calgary, a physical office. We've got a virtual office in Vernon, Toronto, and Montreal. We're about 100 consultants, like I said. Key partnerships are Microsoft. We're one of the fastest gold certified partners in Microsoft Canada history. That certification is no longer used. They don't use gold certified partners anymore. We're still heavily partnered with Microsoft. We're also partnered with Databricks, big users of their software, as well as Snowflake. So kind of a wide range of data-specific tools and governance tools as well. Here's some of our customers. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm going to talk quickly about the ones that we've done Purview specifically for. So one of the first ones was Aimco, where we actually implemented a Purview pilot before Purview had even gone to general release. So we were showing off the capabilities of it specifically as a data catalog. So those users were looking to know what kind of data sets they have and specifically how long they were available, because there were licensing agreements that they had for different data sets. So if it surpassed the licensing amount, they would no longer be able to see them. So they needed that included in the data catalog, so they knew when they could re-up on their ownership of that data set. Next is Suncor. Suncor was a pretty big implementation. They implemented Purview out of the box, which is just vanilla Purview. It has all the features that Purview we're familiar with, but and we'll get into this later, we implemented a solution that we call Purview Manager to extend the capabilities of it. We'll talk about like how we were able to do that and the feature specifically that we're able to implement. The reason I call this one out is as we roll into other clients, we are able to bring that technology with us. So as we go from client to client, we notice similar pain points and we're able to bring forward that accelerator to new clients and you'll get that benefit of it. So that's something we're pretty proud of. Also, Sunwing is one of our newest ones. We're implementing Purview and Purview Manager. That's pretty part and parcel. A lot of the projects that we start, we want to turn Purview on right away so we can start to capture the data landscape as well as give the additional functionality with Purview Manager. So that's what we're doing at Sunwing, and we're just getting started there. Here's some other case studies. It's going to be in the slide deck, so feel free to read a little bit deeper. Many of these are just like a big data project, so there are governance portions of them, but there are also like data engineering, predictive models, reporting. These are like some major successes for us, but they're just not really specific to Purview. So Pemina, Suncor, Saputo, some of our big enterprise clients that we've rolled out our software at. They're really pleased. We've got a quote later from Suncor, but I've talked specifically about the Purview engagements. So please try to take some time to read these later. What I will call out specifically was ROA, which was one of the first Fabric rollouts. I don't know if you know folks know Fabric that well. Today we're going to be looking at the different personas of Purview, but Fabric actually brings together the different personas of our lines of business. So it's the data engineering, it's the predictive data science, it's the streaming ingestion, it's the reporting. All of those things are brought together in like one package, Microsoft Fabric. So please check our social media. We're going to be doing a webinar with Fabric as well. We're pretty excited to talk about that. But let's talk about Purview specifically and the reasons that folks are driven to Purview. Some like the benefits, the conceptual benefits that it offers. First and foremost is the data lexicon profile. So expose business glossary terms and definitions to enterprise stakeholders. This is very big, especially when we are working at big organizations where sometimes the people implementing a solution have moved on. The documentation isn't as well as we'd like it. When our stakeholders are looking at our visualizations and they have a question about how metric is calculated, it's really important that there is the transparency so that they can understand how the calculation is calculated. I've heard some horror stories where CEOs have dragged some developers into a room and they have to reverse engineer how a KPI is displayed. So like it's really hard to drive usage of these things that we develop unless we're familiar with how they work. Next is stakeholder trust. Stakeholder trust, it's important to increase the confidence in data source of truth and understanding of cleansing and transformation. This is where the data lineage comes to play. I've worked at a number of organizations where they have ingested the same source 2 or 3 different times in 2 or 3 different permutations. Some reports point to one source, some reports point to the other source. Usually when we talk about our source of truth, we're talking about a lakehouse or a data warehouse. So it's important to know that what we have identified as the source of truth is actually where those insights are coming from, right? So we really want to promote confidence to our stakeholders that the place that they're expecting their insights to come from is in fact the source of truth and not just an Excel file that exists on somebody's computer. Data estate transparency is understanding the data landscape, including multi-cloud, on-premise, and SSA and SaaS applications. So often now, especially in our bigger clients, we're seeing adoption beyond a single cloud. So beyond just Azure, we've got AWS, we've got some Google, we've got some on-prem, and what Purview is excellent at is connecting to all these different things, right? So we've got some things in Databricks, we've got some things in Azure, we've got Snowflake. Databricks, uh, Purview will connect all of those and scan them and offer insights so that we can have an idea of all the different elements we have. It also comes back to the point that I was talking about earlier, which is if we've ingested the same data 2 or 3 times, it's going to let us know it. So more and more, when we start a project, we're more eager to turn on Purview to give the enterprises that insight about what actual data they have. Next is sensitive data governance. So it's very important to understand the confidential and restricted data we have in our systems. Purview is extremely helpful in that it has some of those classifications built in based on the rule sets that it has. So it's able to figure out if you've got a credit card number, if you've got a driver's license, etc. It's based on a set of rules that are just regular expressions. It comes with hundreds and hundreds of default rules, but you can absolutely build your own. It's just regular expressions, and every time you do a scan, it's going to figure out if you've got something that you need to know about. It's really important to figure out what kind of information and private information we have amongst our data estate. Next is the data management security. So once we know that we have sensitive data, it's important for us to be able to manage least privilege. So Purview offers some ability there to manage some of that access, specifically through collections. Data asset documentation. This is nobody wants to do documentation. Nobody wants to do lineage documentation. And this is where Purview does a lot of that work for you. We say that Purview is that governance is a process, not a product. But Purview does a lot of the grunt work for data governance for you. So it's doing a lot of that scanning, which informs its data asset documentation and surfacing it through our data catalog. So it lets us know information about our different data assets and where they reside, et cetera, et cetera. So that can be extremely helpful, especially when you've got this ginormous task of performing data governance where you may not have had a product before. Last is minimize data exposure. So in an era of cyber attacks, it's becoming more and more prevalent that these are a risk. So knowing when there has been an exposure, knowing what data sets could be, what type of data resides in compromised systems can be extremely important. Right. So if somebody does get access, knowing specifically what they got access to, including things that are sensitive data. Right. It's unfortunate, but it is kind of the age that we live in. Let's talk about the Purview capabilities. We talked a little bit about them in some of the drivers, but like what is Purview good at? First is the data source setup. So we talked about this a little bit. It's just the amount of data sources that Purview can connect to. We'll talk about them next in the other slide, and that we're able to extend that list even further. But it's truly, we'll show it when I'm doing the demo, just the amount of different sources that we can connect through Purview is pretty staggering. Next is the searchable catalog. So as we talked about, like we want the ability to figure out what assets we have. I don't want to build a Power BI report if there's one that already exists. I want to augment that current one. So Purview gives you a lot of insight. It also, in some cases, will allow you to connect directly to the data set. So I'm looking for a specific piece of data, and I'm able to quickly generate a report on it. Usually, if there isn't one, you can go ahead, kind of do what you want. But at the end of the day, you're trying to use your source of truth and figure out the correct data set to use. Next is the data curation. So out of the box, it's going to be able to do some scanning capabilities. It's going to read your sources. But what you really want to do is build out some of those descriptions. Arguably, some tools have like a large language model capabilities where they're able to generate some of that stuff. But at the end of the day, you're going to want to further curate what you have about your data asset. So increase the amount of information you have about it, including who's responsible for it, if it's governed, et cetera, et cetera. We'll dig into that specifically in the demo, but it is important to kind of do more than just the bare minimum of scanning a data source. Data lineage clarity. This is a real cool feature of Databricks. Other tools for sure have it, but it is so important in understanding what goes into your data, where it's coming from. Because if you're making a decision based on a KPI on a dashboard, and you're looking at the lineage and you realize that your source hasn't updated in 3 months, that can be a huge problem. You can prevent huge issues by understanding the steps that your data goes before it's consumed. Data estate ownership. So there's built-in reporting in Purview that tells things like how many searches are there for different assets. It kind of ranks a few of the assets. It's not the best out of the box reporting. We've kind of added to it a little bit. But it is important that when we implement software solutions that we're able to show the usage so that when we are continuing to develop something that we are gearing it towards our users, right? We're not creating features that have no intrinsic value. Custom exploration as well as the extendability of the API. So the creation of Purview was done really smartly. It's built on top of Apache Atlas, which is an open source tool for data governance. Purview is kind of the special sauce that Microsoft has poured onto it. They have built out the APIs so it's pretty extendable, which kind of opens the door for us to do a lot of customization with Purview Manager that kind of gives you additional functionality. So these things here are what is offered out of the box for Purview. Next is things that we can do with it, and we can continue to expand upon them. But these are things that we can do. Did I just go back a slide? I did go back a slide. Sorry about that. These are things that we can do by extending what we have at Purview. We love Purview, but we've implemented it in a number of different clients. We know some pain points, and we're able to, with new clients, give them the benefit of this for no charge once we do a project with them. Configuration efficiency. So it's very simple to think that there are only going to be a few collections, but that's more often not the case. So being able to quickly change things and actually build new data sources programmatically can be extremely efficient. So you're able to add thousands of collections, thousands of data assets through a Purview Manager as opposed to scanning them all individually can be extremely helpful. Changes at scale, when you need to update hundreds of data assets, you don't want to manually go through them, which is how you would have to do it with Purview out of the box. Purview Manager allows you to make those changes because it's interfacing directly with the API as opposed to using the out-of-the-box UI. So it allows you to do those large changes. Expandable API code base. One of the things that a client was interested in was SSAS. There is no SSAS connector in Purview. Maybe there will be. There's currently not. So we were able, through Purview Manager, to extend the capabilities, scan a BIM file, which is like how we store our information in SSAS, kind of like our solution file, and derive source to target. So we were able to figure out what tables would go into the SSAS cube. Again, as we continue to build out sources that out of the box Purview has, these are now just part of Purview Manager. So when we roll into a new client, if they have SSAS, it's just it's going to work out of the box of Purview Manager. Augmented UI capabilities. We talked a little about this before, which is we're able to make changes beyond the limitations of the UI. So if I need to make thousands of changes to data assets, we're able to do that as opposed to having to manually do them, which is never fun. Nobody wants to be heading that up. Environmental deployments. So because Purview Manager stores the data to like drive Purview Manager in an Azure SQL database, it's very easy for us to then point to a different instance of Purview and deploy that information. More often than people think, governance is an iterative process. We're going to change our collections. We're going to change our topology pretty frequently once we're starting. And this kind of gives us the ability to do that, right? We may be able to rearrange everything really quickly, whereas like if we had to go through the out of the box purview, that may take a while, and it may be difficult to, if we're only doing the one environment. Last but not least is disaster recovery. Purview doesn't have disaster recovery, but Azure SQL does, which is what Purview Manager is built on. So it's really easy for us, if there is an issue, to quickly deploy Azure Purview because all the resources are stored in Purview Manager. Here's a quote about Purview Manager. SDK and the Purview Manager Framework Accelerator provided accelerated functions and processes to complete basic technical data management capabilities of Azure Microsoft Purview. Their Purview Manager framework allows the core data management, data governance features of Azure Purview out of the box to be accelerated and scaled. So that was a happy customer, kind of what we're aiming to do and what we're willing to do for additional organizations. But one last thing before we get to the demo, which is just to demonstrate the source breadth. So we'll deal more with that once we get into the demo of just potential sources that Azure can Purview can connect to. But you can see here, it's just like a wide range of a combination of Azure, your Power BI tenant, your corporate network. These may be on-prem, on-prem and third-party sources, and AWS. So it's just like a wide range of different sources that may be on-prem, that may be many different sources. But without much ado, let's get into our demo. So I'm going to be acting as different personas in this demo. So first would be like a data analyst or like a Power BI developer. So I'm going to look for sales information. And you can see I've come up with a whole bunch of results. And you can see the different types of them. So I've got Power BI reports. I've got storage in my Azure Data Lake. I'm going to open this one really quick. Just to quickly show off some of the lineage. This is a great example of lineage because it shows me in my Power BI report that later goes to a dashboard, all the different sources that go into the data set and then the report. So this is fantastic. I can see an Azure SQL view. I've got a table. I've got some data lake information. They're all coming together into another data set to create that report. So that's super useful when I know specifically what's going into my report. I'm going to go back to the data sets itself. It allows me the ability to select my data source type. In this case, I'm going to go for Azure SQL database. I'm going to click this specific one. This looks kind of what I want, my salesperson information. And based on the asset, there's going to be different information available. But for the SQL table, I've got some information about the properties, so where it's stored on the SQL database. The schema information, so that'll be different data types and column names it has. The lineage, pretty simple lineage on this one. We're just copying it into Data Lake Store. Some contact information, so we can see for this one it's not filled out, but I could edit it and assign an expert and an owner. So if I had questions or something, I could reach out to those people or request access. It's going to show me related tables. So in this case, I can see my sales schema only has one table called salesperson, but I can go to the same database, which is AdventureWorks and Azure SQL, look at a different schema, and then I can see all the tables that it has. So I've gone to production, and these are how many tables that it has, right? Just the different schemas that exist in that database. History for this one, there's nothing. So if this was the data that I was looking for, I can look at my schema and I can see like, oh, I'm interested in sales last year. I could go ahead and use it. Azure SQL offers the ability to quickly create a Power BI report based on the data set, which is really cool. Not available for all data sources, but a pretty cool thing. So I found my data source. Now I'm able to make my my report. And based on the lineage, I can tell there doesn't seem to be any other reports on this one. So good to go. My next persona would be that of like the Purview operator itself. It's the person who's setting up scans, who's setting up topologies. So this is kind of a map of all the different collections, which are like a logical grouping of data sets and their topology. So you can see here some collections that I don't have any information in, and other ones I have a number of different sources. I'm going to zoom in on this one just to show that within my sales, I've got an Azure Databricks endpoint, Azure SQL, and Azure Data Lake Score. I'm going to look at the details within my Azure Databricks. So I'm going to view details. It's going to show me how often I've committed scans. Scans are a little bit expensive, so you don't really want to do them every day. It might be something you want to do every week or every month. Hopefully, there aren't that many changes that it needs to be that frequent, but you're able to do that. It tells me the amount of assets I have in it. So these are going to be Azure SQL table. I can go ahead and click that. It's going to show me the amount of assets. And as you can see here, it's a combination of Azure Databricks tables and Azure Databricks schemas. If I clicked into them, it would be just as we showed in the SQL table that I'd be able to find that schema information. And I can see the occurrence of the scans. So this is going to show me when they were specifically run, right? As well as the what it found on each scan. So within this collection of collections, this topology of collections, I'm able to add a new source. I'm not going to do this now because it would take some time to scan. But as I mentioned before, you're able to see what sources are available. So you could click here and find out what sources and the different functionalities of them all. They're not all built the same. There's some really good functionalities and some that isn't always apparent. Like it says it does Azure Databricks lineage, but we've found we needed to build that out as something in Purview Manager, right? So we improved the capabilities of its lineage by developing through it. So you could click all these sources and configure how you wanted to scan them. This would be kind of the role that I would perform as a administrator of Purview. I could also set up scan rules. So that's things like check for Australian license plates, et cetera, as well as classification. So that's the things it's going to pick up when it runs. Last is like a data steward type role. This is giving me an oversight of all my assets, what's fully created, how many have owners assigned, how many classifications, and how many are out of date. This is our demo environment, so it's not very good. More than likely, though, I'm not going to be looking at all of the assets at once. I'd be filtering by a specific collection. So in this case, sales. And I can see I've got 3% of it with sensitive calculations. Very little is fully curated, and only 3% has owner's assigned. So not very good, but it tells me information about that. It's also got, as I mentioned before, a number of searches and the number of the assets that people are specifically interested in. So you could use this as an opportunity to say like, oh, a lot of people are using this table in silver. Is it necessarily something we want to build out in our curated layer, like our Lakehouse data model? Potentially, that could be giving something with a lot of value. I'm going to finish really quickly. What are next steps? We have some offerings in the Microsoft Azure Marketplace we can do longer demos, half-day sessions. We can do a pilot project if that's kind of what you're looking for, or we can do a full implementation, including Purview Manager. Those are all available in the Azure Marketplace. Are there any questions? I know I kind of went quickly, and let's see.
I don't think we had any questions that kind of stood out immediately, but if anyone has any questions that pop up, we'd be happy to take them over email.
Yeah, feel free to reach out.
Mhm.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks everybody for
Oh,
coming.
I think we have one question here asking if we can give a more real example of the Purview Manager with a client.
Yeah, so one of their clients, I talked about the SSAS example. They wanted an additional source. We built it out. At Suncor, the lineage that Databricks offered out of the box wasn't good enough. So we were able to use external libraries that gave them the lineage. So when they normally scanned it, they wouldn't get it. We brought it in. What are some other ones? The ability to somebody when they originally started, they made the topology one way, so the series of collections in the order that they're in one way. They quickly realized that it wasn't the way. They iterated quickly. If they were to do it manually, I think they said it would have taken 2 weeks just to change every single asset to the correct collection. But because we used Purview Manager, we were able to update it and push the changes within, I think, 25 minutes. So that was also a big win. Like the ability to not have to do things manually was huge too. There was one client that was interested in SSIS. I don't think we ever implemented it, but we proved out it could be done. So they were using SSIS to take their source data on-prem, transform it into their DIMS and facts, and they wanted to have level lineage to say what source tables goes into my DIMS and what goes into my facts. So I don't think we fully implemented it, but we just proved that it could be another source that we could use. So just showing that beyond the capabilities of out of the box Purview, there's additional functionalities that we can deliver. Does that answer your question?
We got a thanks, so I think we're good to go. Again, if anyone has any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us here. And thank you, Patrick, so much. And thank you to everyone who joined us today.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody. Sorry I went long.